Welcome back to our look at the geographies of religion, and we pick up with Islam. Islam, again, falls into our category of Semitic or Abrahamic faiths and is a direct descendant, religion-wise, from Judaism and Christianity along that Judeo-Christian tradition. The symbol of Islam is the crescent moon and star, and this is significant because Islam doesn't permit the depiction of Muhammad. So as a result, the symbolism associated with this faith relies on the moon and the star. When we talk about Islam, the key individuals here are Muhammad and Allah. Muhammad is the final prophet. This is what separates the Islamic faith from Judaism, from Christianity. That Moses and his connection with God isn't what drives Islam. That Jesus Christ and his relationship with God doesn't drive the faith. It's actually the relationship between Muhammad and Allah. Allah, in this case, is the same omnipresent God that's present in Judaism and Christianity. But the difference here, again, is that Muhammad is the final prophet. The Islamic faith recognizes the existence and the presence and the heritage of the Jewish and Christian faiths, but it says that Muhammad is the final prophet, and this is the individual that's going to carry our faith forward. Muhammad's teachings and writings and the Word of God is found in the Quran. The Quran is the holy book of the Islamic faith of Muslims. And the Quran includes stories, messages, incorporation of Moses and Jesus and Abraham. But it finds that Muhammad again is the final prophet. Islam is universalizing. As I mentioned previously, it is the fastest growing faith on earth today. So while it's not the largest, there's 1.6 billion Muslims, it is in fact the fastest growing. What we find in many of our Muslim countries or places that are looking to associate religion and politics is the desire for what's called a caliphate. A caliphate is a theocracy. It is a form of government that is guided by the Quran, that is guided by the Muslim hierarchy. And when we look at what's happening in the Islamic faith today, we see a pretty significant split. Much like Christianity has the split between Catholicism and Protestantism, much like the Jewish faith has a split between the Orthodox part of the faith and the Reformed part of the faith, Muslims have a split between Sunni and Shia. And what distinguishes Sunnis from Shias is that Sunnis believe that the successor could come from outside the family, that an imam is a spiritual leader. The Shia believe that the head of the Muslim faith needs to be a blood descendant of Muhammad, so that family requisite is important. And while this little split that goes back to 632 continues to be an issue, we see that it's really we've seen that for 1400 years, the Sunnis and the Shia have grown very different identities, have grown very different communities. And again, it's the result of who would succeed Muhammad back in the 7th century. Something that could seemingly be so trivial has led to this very deep divide within the Muslim community today. When we look at the presence of majority Muslim countries or majority Muslim regions around the world, we see the presence within North Africa and the Middle East. And you could see that, again, most countries that are Muslim majority are also Sunni majority, with the exception of Iran, parts of Iraq, Bahrain. There's not a large dominant presence of Shia. Within the world today, we look at Syria, which is run by a Shia family, and the Al-Assads are a form of Shia called the Alawites, which is a syncretic form of Islam. The Alawites actually practice some Christian holidays. They incorporate more aspects and more attributes of other faiths into their rituals. So again, the Muslim faith, while we look at it as again a split between Sunnis and Shias, we should be mindful that as we dig deeper into the Sunni and Shia sects, that there's a lot more denominations, from strict adherence to the Quran to more of a reformed approach. So again, it's important to recognize that these large religions carry with them a massive amount of diversity. When we look at the diffusion of Islam, we see it growing out of the Arabian Peninsula. So it grew out of where Muhammad lived, where he traveled, where he met the angel Gabriel and received the word from Allah. So we could see again this form of contagious diffusion as different caravans extended out of the Arabian Peninsula. We could see how space and time closely correlate to the diffusion of Islam. The diffusion of Islam, again, is a great example of contagious diffusion, moving wave-like from an area of origin. And here's a closer look at the breakdown between the Sunnis and Shia within the Middle East today. Again, you can see where the Shia are the majority in Iran and parts of Iraq, into Azerbaijan, but for the most part, our Muslim countries are majority, and many of them overwhelmingly Sunni. And when we look at how religion, again, plays a part in our everyday life, helps us make sense of the world around us and shapes our identity and community, we see that Islam has a prescribed way of living. And this appears as what's known as the 5 pillars of Islam, 5 pillars of practice of the faith. The first is what's known as Shahada, and Shahada is the profession of faith. So this says that there is one God, Allah, and Muhammad is the final prophet. So this profession of faith is something that is made as part of the Muslim faith. The second is prayer, and Muslims are required to pray 5 times a day. The term Qibla, which means compass, indicates that Muslims are always going to pray towards Mecca. Now, if we're in Towson, or if we're in the mid-Atlantic or the east coast of the United States, that means that Muslims are going to pray to the east 5 times a day. But for Muslims that are located in Southeast Asia, they're going to pray to the west or the northwest. So this prayer 5 times a day follows a very prescribed ritual where Muslims are going to pray towards Mecca. They're going to do so before dawn, they're going to do so at noon, late afternoon, at sunset, and again before bed. So this prayer is a very important part of the faith, and it's something that really is identifiable in day-to-day rituals. The third is Ramadan, and Ramadan is fasting for a lunar month, a little bit shorter than our calendar month. Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset. Now, this may sound similar to Lent. This might sound similar to other periods of fasting that we find in our faiths. Again, we can see how a lot of these rituals, a lot of these expressions cross faith boundaries. While this is called Ramadan, and the dates and the requirements may differ a little bit, we see versions of fasting in our other faiths. Again, the Christian version of Lent is very similar to Ramadan. The fourth pillar is what's known as zakat, and zakat is giving charity, giving alms. It's expected that Muslims pay anywhere between 2.5% to 10% of their income to charity, to help the community, to help those less fortunate, to provide a social safety net for other Muslims. And then the fifth pillar is what's known as the Hajj. The Hajj is a pilgrimage to Mecca. All Muslims who are physically and financially capable are expected to make the Hajj at least once in their lifetime. This is a very important ritual. Somebody who has completed the Hajj might be known as a Haji. And within the Muslim faith, that is it's a point of pride that you have completed the Hajj. You have completed this aspect of the Muslim faith. So these 5 pillars of Islam, these 5 pillars of practice, are very visual, very profound, very much guiding aspects of the faith. And it's a way for us to identify some of the differences in the Muslim faith, some of these different requirements, but also recognize how these different practices cross into other religions within the Abrahamic faith, and as we'll see, other religions outside of that faith. And we'll wrap up our look at religions by looking at some of the key religions of Asia. Now, when we talk about the religions of Asia, we're talking about a massive area. But as we're going to see, a couple religions carry with them a very high number of followers. The first is Hinduism. Hinduism is what's known as a Vedic faith. The Vedas were writings from thousands of years ago that tell stories, that describe different gods. So Hinduism is a polytheistic faith. It looks at a few key gods, Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu, and it sees how these creators, destroyers, preservers interact to create the world that we have today. A safe or conservative estimate suggests that there's about 900 Hindus in the world today. Most of these Hindus are living in India and in other parts of South and Southeast Asia. Hindu is the largest ethnic religion. So we looked at Judaism and we saw how there were 13.9 million Jews. Well, Hinduism carries on that idea of ethnic religion, but at this point we see nearly 1 billion followers of this faith. The Hindu faith has adapted over time. So again, we're looking at a series of writings. We're looking at the Vedas that are some of them thousands of years old, and we see how over time different interpretations, different adaptations have influenced the Hindu faith. This idea of Santana Dharma is a really important part of the Hindu faith. This means eternal truth. So through life, we are seeking truth. And Santana Dharma looks at that driving goal of the Hindu faith, to find that eternal truth. Hindus believe in reincarnation, the idea that we will be born again. And what guides this principle of reincarnation is karma and moksha. Moksha is the freedom or the release from reincarnation. It's guided by karma. So if you live a pure life, pure in thoughts, pure in actions, you are going to break that cycle of life and death. You are going to reach bliss. You will achieve moksha. So moksha is the idea that we're breaking reincarnation, that reincarnation isn't something desirable because we're going to continue to experience life and death, loss and pain, where once we live a life that, where we, guided by karma, where our actions, our thoughts, our deeds are all pure, then we could reach that state of moksha, that release from reincarnation. You could see some of the aspects here, again, in other faiths, where living a good life will advance you to a better afterlife, something that's very profound in the Abrahamic faiths. An image of Diwali on your screen right now looks at a celebration of good over evil, again, so that dichotomy of good versus bad, light versus darkness. The Diwali festival in Hinduism is a celebration of light or good over evil or darkness. And then we look at another ritual called the Kumbh Mela, which is the largest migration. We often look at the pilgrimage to Mecca as a massive migration. But this Kumbh Mela, which lasts over a number of days, is in fact a much larger migration of Hindus into the Ganges River. And the idea being that the Ganges is pure, and by cleansing yourself within the river, you're also cleansing your sins. So in part 3, we're going to pick up with our religions of Asia and conclude our discussion at the geographies of religion.